I want to start with a simple question. If one paycheck disappeared tomorrow, would your life still work? Not comfortably, not optimally, just function. For a lot of households, the honest answer is no. And what's interesting is that this answer shows up even among people who, on paper, are doing very well. 2 solid careers, 2 full-time incomes, no obvious financial mistakes. And yet, there's this quiet, persistent feeling that everything is held together by constant motion. As long as both people keep working, as long as nothing goes wrong, as long as there are no interruptions. I've been thinking about this a lot because this feeling isn't rare anymore, it's common. And it doesn't seem to be tied to laziness or poor decisions or a lack of ambition. It feels structural. Many households today are earning more than households did a generation ago, even after adjusting for inflation. But despite that, they feel less secure, less flexible, more exposed. That's the paradox I want to talk about. Because this isn't really a story about income. It's a story about what happens when a life is built with no margin. When people talk about financial security, they usually talk about income, how much someone makes, whether a household is 5 figures or 6 figures, whether the number is trending up or down. But income on its own doesn't tell you how safe a system is. It only tells you how much fuel is flowing through it. What actually matters is capacity, how much the system requires just to keep running. Most households don't consciously decide to live at full capacity. It happens gradually. A slightly larger mortgage because 2 incomes can support it. A second car because 2 people need to be in 2 places at once. Childcare because both adults are working full-time. Each decision makes sense in isolation. None of them feel reckless. In fact, they often feel responsible. But over time, those decisions stack. And the household quietly transitions from having optional income to having mandatory income. At that point, the question is no longer how much you earn. The question becomes how much your life demands every single month before you have any room to breathe. This is why a household can earn a high income and still feel fragile. Not because they're failing, but because their expenses have been sized to their maximum earning potential. There's no slack left in the system, and systems without slack don't bend, they break. For a long time, the idea of 2 incomes was associated with safety. If one person lost a job, the other income could carry the household. It acted as a buffer, but that only works if the second income is actually optional. The moment a household builds its fixed costs around 2 paychecks, that second income stops being a buffer. It stops being a backup. It becomes infrastructure. It becomes the thing that keeps the lights on, the mortgage paid, the childcare covered, the calendar functioning. And infrastructure isn't something you can turn off temporarily. You don't pause it for 3 months and see how things go. If it fails, everything downstream feels it immediately. This is where a lot of the anxiety comes from. Not from low income, but from dependency. Both people are working, not because they want to, but because the system requires it. The household isn't choosing 2 incomes anymore. It's servicing them. At that point, a job loss doesn't feel like a setback. It feels like a threat to the entire structure. That's a very different psychological state from simply earning less money. This is also why the current situation can feel worse than it did in the past, even though incomes are higher. Earlier households often operated below their maximum capacity. One income carried the essentials. The second income, if it existed at all, was unused until it was needed. That unused capacity mattered. It created room for error. It allowed households to absorb shocks without immediately unraveling. Today, many households are optimized instead. Both incomes are active all the time. Schedules are tight, expenses are tight. There's very little redundancy. Optimized systems are efficient, but they're also sensitive. They work beautifully under normal conditions and then struggle when anything unexpected appears. A health issue, a layoff, burnout, a family obligation that can't be postponed. None of these are rare events over the course of a life. They're inevitable. And when a household is already running near its limit, those events don't create inconvenience. They create crisis. That's why people who look successful from the outside can feel perpetually on edge on the inside. They're not failing, they're just operating without margin. So, what does stability actually look like in this environment? It doesn't come from abandoning work or romanticizing the past, and it doesn't require going back to a single income in practice. It starts with a different design principle. Instead of building a life that requires every dollar you earn, you build a life that can survive on less than that. I think of this as creating a one-income floor, not a one-income ceiling, a floor. The idea is simple. Your non-negotiable expenses are sized so that if one income paused, the household would still function. Not comfortably, not indefinitely, but without immediate collapse. When you do that, the second income changes role. It stops being infrastructure and becomes a buffer again. It can be used to build savings, to reduce debt, to create flexibility, to buy time. This doesn't feel dramatic at first. In fact, it often feels like you're underutilizing your earning power. But what you're really doing is buying optionality. You're giving the household room to breathe when life inevitably deviates from the plan. This shift doesn't usually show up as a single bold decision. It shows up as a series of quiet ones. Choosing a mortgage that doesn't assume constant income growth. Keeping fixed costs lower than what the bank says you can afford. Resisting the urge to convert every raise into a permanent obligation. From the outside, this can look like restraint, or even underachievement. But from the inside, it feels like something else entirely. It feels like control. When one income becomes optional again, work changes. Career decisions change. Stress changes. The household isn't constantly reacting, it's choosing. And over time, something subtle happens. The second income starts doing what people originally hoped it would do. It creates stability instead of pressure. Not because it's large, but because it's not required. The most dangerous financial position isn't low income. It's high income with no exit. When every dollar is already assigned a job, there's no room for change. No space to slow down. No way to respond when life demands something different. Real security doesn't come from earning more. It comes from needing less when things go wrong. Margin is what turns income into safety, and two incomes aren't a problem on their own. They only become a problem when both of them are already spent before they arrive. If this way of thinking feels unfamiliar, that's normal. Most people are taught to optimize for earning, not for resilience. But once you start looking at your life through that lens, it becomes hard to unsee. And the question shifts. Not how much can we make, but how much can we lose and still be okay?